Welcome back to The Art of Aging. I'm your host, Sherry Gibson-Walters, certified professional consultant on aging and CEO of Harmony Caregiving. You ever had that one friend who shows up in your life at just the right moment? Someone who sees the dream before it's even real and helps you build it from the ground up? Today, I get to introduce you to my person like that, and that is Darla Conlon. Darla, she is not only a dear friend, she was actually instrumental and played a huge role in the very foundation of Harmony Caregiving. But there is a twist. Darla isn't just behind the scenes. She is also a seasoned social worker who has walked a road personally and professionally. And she's here today to share that story with us, with you, so that it can inspire you the way that her story inspired me many years ago. Darla and I actually met at the Center for Spiritual Living here in Edmonton, and she was doing a talk when I had walked in. I actually didn't know Darla before this, and she got up on stage and she talked about how she rolled up into the Center for Spiritual Living to actually plan her funeral. And then she began to talk about some of the experiences that she had, which led her to suffer from a chronic illness. I guess we would actually call it an autoimmune disorder. So I'm really happy to have Darla on this talk with us today, and really excited to share the path that led to Harmony Caregiving and to a friendship of many years. So what I'm going to begin with is just asking Darla to kind of share a little bit more about that story.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
It is such a pleasure.
It is. It's a pleasure to be here. We've talked about this for a while.
We have, yes.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
I would have to say that started in 2004. I was working as a team leader for a home for people living with HIV and AIDS, living and dying from that. And I had a traumatic accident there one day. It was an emotional, psychological accident, and it ended up deeming me disabled for the rest of my life. So it was severe pain. I remember waking up the next morning in severe pain, like full body pain, that it was just so critical I couldn't even stand it. And I ended up calling an ambulance, and that kind of started my journey of, I think it was almost 12 years. It didn't end up being a lifetime, which was beautiful.
Yes.
But it was a 12-year journey of home care, being quite sick, medications, and just it's a huge story, really, as to what happened to me, and able to surpass that. So it was all quite lovely.
So you said that it was an accident that happened at work, and it was psychologically and emotionally traumatic for you.
Yes, there was some physical.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, there was some physical. I remember having to hold a door shut for a long time until the police and the ambulance showed up. So that, I think, probably triggered the full body pain.
And I definitely think we've been doing some studying on Dr. Gabor Mate.
Yes.
Last week we had a conversation with Saskia about the determinants of health, but really focused in on how trauma affects our bodies, and how a lot of people don't realize that it actually stays with you until you do something about that trauma.
Yes.
And you sort of describe it this way. It's like stuck in your muscles, in your body. Can you maybe share a little bit more about your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's important to understand that trauma obviously begins, for me, at a young age. So as a survivor of sexual abuse and working through my life, difficulties at home, there was just things that all kind of piled on top of that. Because back then in the 60s, you never talked about things like that. So it's kept inside, and it just kind of manifested from there. There were many traumas over the years. I am a survivor of multiple traumas, and left them inside my body. It was not until the accident happened in May of 2004 that I started seeking help, psychological help. I had a psychiatrist, a psychologist, many doctors, because nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. There wasn't any test that would tell them what was wrong with me, other than chronic pain, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, is kind of where they were at. And so that manifested in my body to the point that I needed a walker and a wheelchair to get through life. And then having to have home care come in. I mean, that's a whole other story of being a young person. I was only in my late 40s, early 40s, having home care come in and bathe you and take care of you and do a lot of that. It was life-changing for me.
I can definitely imagine what that's like for you in your like late 40s, right? And why so many people don't even try to get help, because if you go to one doctor and you don't get answers, or you sometimes maybe with this autoimmune disorders, they can't really find the answers really quickly, right? So could you talk a little bit more about that experience of going to like multiple doctors? And
it was awful, actually, and extremely frustrating. And I can't think of the word for it, but when you're not believed. So, all I was getting through all of these specialists and everything was that it was in my head. Well, trauma is
in your head.
In your head until it manifests through your body.
Yeah.
So it took many years and many doctors until they finally decided that it was, chronic pain due to fibromyalgia. And then unfortunately I had a psychiatrist that abused medications through his patients, and I was one of those patients where I became addicted to OxyContin and Percocet for quite a few years just so that I could live, because the pain was so intense. And the journey was a long one. It was a very hard one. Yeah, and that kind of took me to the next step of what I was going to do.
Yeah, because, and thank you for sharing that, because it is not an easy journey to be sharing. And I think it actually took you quite some time to even be able to share openly like this for
definitely.
people. And I think that that's what a lot of people experience too, right? And one of the things I want to say that I've always really admired too is like, so you were one of the first people to work with and actually hold the hands of somebody who's dying of HIV and AIDS.
Yes.
And I think that speaks volumes to who you are as a person, because not a lot of people even knew what it was back then, or like really understood it. So to hold the hands of a dying person who is dying of something like AIDS or HIV, I mean, like I said, speaks volumes to who you are. But then also another taboo subject that you're willing to talk about here today is the whole experience you had that really took you out of the workforce for 11 years before you and I met, right? Was it 11 years?
2004 to 2004, and it was about 11 years.
About 11 years.
Yeah, you bet.
And so just kind of speaking to the fact that you wanted to get off those highly addictive medications, and you had that total mindset to do that, but a little bit more about what you learned from your walking through the door of the center to being able to change your mindset and continue to stay focused on what your goal was.
Yes. Well, I would have to say, like we talked about, I went to the center and searched for a minister or somebody that could conduct my funeral. I didn't have I was told by this particular psychiatrist that I had to look for the quality of my life, not the quantity. So to me, and the way I was going, I believed in my mind that I was dying a slow death.
And especially as you hear it from many medical professionals, right? You do start to get that sense.
And like you say, talking about it was hard because it was very shame-based for me. Right?
Yes.
So it took a long time and a lot of healing before I was able to do that. And that was through the help of the center and the minister there. He was just a beautiful man that walked my journey with me, as well as many other people from the center. So I think having that positive reinforcement, being taught and learning, you and I took the training together, which was over 2 years, of learning how to pray for myself, learning how to accept my reality in to the degree that I could make those decisions to get better. So it was eliminating stressors in my life. Stress is a very high motivator for also disease and sickness.
Yeah, definitely. Last week we talked about how cortisol levels in the body increase, and that is what actually can contribute to these chronic illnesses.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, so I mean, I just developed many relationships there. I volunteered, I sat on the board, I just took every course that I could take just so that I could learn. I was very blessed because I only lived a couple of blocks away.
Yeah.
So, off I would go in my walker.
And you could do that, right?
And I could do that and just took class after class and until I actually believed that I was going to get better. It's not second guessing it. It's just that I will be well.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yes.
And learning to live moment to moment.
Yeah.
Not planning what's going to happen tomorrow because I truly don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
A
But
phone
embracing
call.
that moment, right?
Embracing the moment.
Yeah.
You bet.
And I know that as we were developing the business with you, and you were instrumental in that whole process, we came up with the term carpe diem, which
Yep.
means seize the day.
You bet.
And it's so huge for not just people who are living with dementia, but it's also huge for people who are living with any sort of illness, because it's like you have to seize the opportunity to be before you can move on to the next day or the next moment, right?
Yes, very much.
And I think that's a lot of what you did learn through the Center of Spiritual Living is mindfulness. You also learned how your thoughts change your reality.
Yeah, well, our thoughts create our life,
Yeah.
right? So, learning that
Yeah.
was a big thing, and just like I say, eliminating the negative thinking, the stinking thinking,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
and just believing in people, believing in my truth, and my truth is that I was going to get better. I wasn't ready to die anymore.
Yeah. That's
Okay,
amazing.
yeah.
And I'm so glad that you did make that choice, because you wouldn't be here today, and you are one of my biggest mentors still today. So
thank you.
And it's so true, right? I remember so many of the small moments of Harmony Caregiving beginnings, right? Where we'd sit on the phone together and we'd literally have the speaker, "Hi, this is Darla and Sherry from Harmony Caregiving." And we would be like, "How can we help you today?" And I think people were probably like, "Wow, there's two people on the line to help me." But it was like we just like did things together. And I remember going into so many people's homes where, I would watch you first, and you always spoke to the person that was about to be cared for by us, right? And it was like some people would, and I've seen this many times, they don't
Yes.
speak to the person, they speak to the person that called them in to do the consultation.
Yes.
So one of the pieces is that person sitting in the chair that's needing the help is always the person that we speak to.
You bet.
I think you probably experienced this. You sort of alluded to it, right?
Or they
Where
talk over you.
they talk over you, or they just don't listen to, some of the things that you talk about in terms of signs and symptoms, things like that. One of the other thoughts I had, Darla, was how you have this very much have this integrated philosophy towards your healing. Can you talk about some of the things that you've done? Because it takes a lot to get off heavy medications like that, and not everybody,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, actually, I do believe that everybody can get off them, but you have to have the right supports in place.
Yes. What I ended up doing is I was no longer, the gentleman and I that were very good friends lived with me, and he had been living with AIDS for a lot of years, and he lived with me for several years actually, and we became very good friends, and he was a support system for me. But he ended up losing the battle to AIDS, and I was then alone and not able to live on my own anymore. So
Right.
the decision had to
know
be
that
made
part.
what was next.
Right.
I still wasn't well. I was still addicted to the OxyContin. And I think at one point I was on like 20 different medications. And the only way I would get better was to give up everything and start anew. So I sold my home, all my belongings basically, and moved into an extended care place, an assisted living place.
Yeah.
And for the first almost year, I think it was about 8 months, I was on the medical unit as I detoxed off all of the drugs.
Right.
And then I ended up getting well enough that I could move into a one-bedroom suite. Suite. It wasn't really a suite, but
it was a one-bedroom and
it was a
yours.
one-bedroom,
Yeah.
and it was mine. And I bought myself a couple of nice chairs and a little fireplace, and I
Yeah.
had it set up quite lovely. And I became very involved. I became president of the resident council, and I was
Yeah.
volunteering my services to help other people. But I had eliminated all outside stresses. I mean, just the thought of, groceries, cleaning, laundry, all of those things that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Which can totally add up for people.
And I just eliminated all that. Yeah. And unfortunately, there was some family members and some friends that I no longer are associated with. And that was just any toxicity in my life I needed to release so that I could start over again.
That's not always easy for people at age 50.
It was
50, right?
48, 49 when things all started. So
I think that that's a really tough thing for people to do, especially when they're in marriage and stuff like that. I think that your courage to do what you had to do, and even to move into that assisted living facility, I mean, not a lot of people would think of that as an option, but you probably really didn't necessarily want to go, but in the situation you were left at, there was no other way.
Yeah.
In our teaching, we kind of talk about how not that you have to accept it, but that you embrace it for what it is, right? So you moved in, you got yourself better. How did you incorporate the teachings that you learned from the center while you were in the assisted living community, and how do you think that helped you?
Well, I think by that time they were just integrated into my life. Yeah. So that's how I lived. I lived for the moment. Mindfulness, talking, sharing my things. I had a lovely psychologist for a long time. And I went through many different ones till I found one that I felt comfortable working with. And then I started kind of dumping all my stuff. And then
that's a good
releasing
way of saying it, right? It is. You're literally dumping it so that you can leave it behind and start to break down whatever it is that's built up in your body.
Yes.
Right? So I think that's really interesting. And, I've really just, through the teaching and the training as a practitioner, is where I started to understand how trauma affects people. And, just recently started to really tap into this Dr. Gabor Mate and Mel Robbins and the people that she brings on her podcast, like Dr. Sarah Saul. I have been absolutely shocked by the fact that this hasn't been talked about more. I find that actually shocking. So,
well, there has been some step towards it, but I think people, the only word I can think of is shame, that people live with a lot of shame when they've been traumatized. And when you're brought up in an era where you don't discuss things, you just keep them inside, or you don't cry, or you don't get mad, and just your upbringing from the 60s, 50s and 60s.
And even before that.
And a lot
right?
before that.
30s, 20s, like some of our clients, right?
Oh, definitely. Because that's who we serve, right? Is the senior population, is the majority of our clients. So you bet.
But for you, having to sort of brush everything under the carpet for so many years, hide things from family, from kids, from all of that, I think that for your children, who are all now adults, and I know some of them, one of them very well, but I think that they must look to you as being they probably already knew this about you, but to get yourself to where you are today, or to get yourself back to work, right, which is part of the story we really want to share, because it was that you and I were intention setters together.
Yes.
Like we were partnered together to do that. And I had said, well, what would you like, to know for yourself? And you said, I'd like to know that I am now able to get a job doing something that utilizes my social work skills and your past. And I said, oh, what did you do before? And it just happened to be that I said to you, well, I'm starting Harmony Caregiving, which is a health and wellness home care company, because I had actually just been through an autoimmune disease as well, which I didn't realize that's what it was until, it turned into cancer, and then I had my own journey. So our paths really came together for this purpose, but not only, right? We've been through so much together. But you were instrumental in helping me get through that journey as well, with, certain things that you had done in your past. Qigong, mindfulness, all of those different movement things. I really am a believer in the fact that you are helping so many other people, and you are ready with your experience. So you aren't with Harmony Caregiving right now because you're on...
I'm on long-term disability until I'm 65, which is coming up in less than a year.
It's a moment for you to say, even though you have to be on a disability leave, you're still able to... You don't have to take that in a negative way, right? And I think that's like a nice thing to express and share with people, is that there are supports that can support people when they have down times.
Well, and that's just it when you live with an autoimmune disease or chronic illnesses. I never know when it's going to hit me.
Yep.
Normally, like right now, I'm managing day to day and I'm doing well, but I have basically no stressors in my life.
Yeah.
Right, so as soon as the stressors come on, usually within 9 months to a year, something will go on with my body, or not.
Yeah.
Or not, because I haven't tested it for a couple of years.
Right.
Right, so
Yeah.
to me, I've even done more healing and more learning, and I believe that I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, I do too. And I've always said that. I think every time, because, the truth of it is that because you do have those ups and downs, ebbs and flows, throughout your time with 8 years with Harmony, there have been times where Darla has to take time off, right? And so then we'd have to ride that with you,
Yes.
which was totally fine. But I always had this like, anybody can make it through. Darla could.
Coming back.
You're coming back because nothing holds you back, which I really, really, really respect in you. I think that's part of what you mentioned, all the people at the center that are like that support network for you.
Yes.
And they were that for me as well, right? And so I think that we're very blessed. And for those that don't have a really strong support system or support person, what's your advice to those people?
Well, I believe we all need a village to be able to get through whatever we're going through in life. And if you don't have those people personally in your life, there's so many different places to reach out, whether it's bereavement, and because we all experience losses every day in our life. And it can be anything from a job loss, a health loss, to a death. So I think that people need to understand that loss is a part of life, and loss is also a part of love. So if you have some fears or you're not well, then I would suggest that you reach out to people, whether it's a counselor, whether it's a dear friend. Everybody has at least, I think, one person that they can turn to.
Yeah.
So, and whether that's professionally or personally, we all need support. We can't, it's very difficult to do any of this on your own. If you don't have people that share love and believe in you, then it's pretty hard to move on.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm thinking about some people that, have a lot of resentments and anger with themselves or with people, and who have kind of shut the door to those people.
Yes.
Or just to people in general, or just shut the door to themselves, right? Lock themselves in, thinking they're not deserving of anything better than what they're experiencing. And sometimes that's total, just not seeing people.
Yes.
And from some of the conversations we had last week, was that social connection is so important for people. Even if you're an introvert and you don't really want to be around people, we're humans, right? We need that human connection. So I do think that is really a key element. And there's lots of different organizations, like you mentioned. One of the other things that you do, Darla, is you are also a caregiver for your mother who lives with Alzheimer's, who's been, we've been on her journey ever since we've started this company. She was
a
really
long one.
Yes, that's a very long time for someone to live with Alzheimer's, right?
It is, yes.
And you've been living that with her. So, finding her all the different communities to live in, and when it was time to move. But that also can add a layer of stress to you.
It can, but I've been really blessed because I have two brothers that are very supportive.
Yes.
So we've done this journey together with Mom.
Yeah, which is...
And I have a lovely husband that is very supportive of my journey. He's been with me almost my entire journey, except for the first few years. So I think, like I said, having that village to move through things, and Mama's in a very good village right now.
Yes.
And we just work together with them and know that one day soon she will be gone. But right now we live every moment with her.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. That you're able to do that, right? And that if you have a bad day, like not a bad day, but a low energy day for yourself, then, you just choose, I'm not going to be able to go do that today.
You got it.
You've got to take care of yourself first. Is that sort of one of the lessons that you've learned throughout this?
100%. If I'm tired, I rest. If I'm in pain, I rest. I don't bring on anything into my life that I'm not ready to move forward on.
Yeah. I think that's an important thing for people to listen to. You've got to listen to your bodies.
100%.
I do have a quote that I'm going to share, but it's something that Dr. Gabor Mate also speaks to. But it says, trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you.
Yes, I believe that 100%.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to understand that, but once I understood the consequences of trauma,
yes,
I was able to start working through it.
Yeah, and that's amazing, right? I mean, yeah, and that comes from his The Myth of Normal.
Yes.
Right? And then another one that he says is, well, this one is so powerful though. Trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside of you. And you already spoke to that with regards to,
Yes.
illness is not a random misfortune. It's a consequence of how we live and how we suppress our truth. So you have said many times.
Yes.
Can you share that again?
Well, if we keep inside of us our sadness or the negativity or the trauma that's happened to us, it's suppression, and we're not actually living what our truth is. And our truth is who we are as a human being, what we offer, what we receive. So my whole truth was masked over. So until I could learn about what my truth is through our teaching and through understanding my own body, then I was able to move forward.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your daily routine looks like? Because I know little bits of your daily routine, and not your whole routine, but your spiritual practices that keep you,
Okay. Well, in the morning, I always do, we have a magazine, and I read a daily guide. And I also use a website. It's a daily motivational, and it gives you affirmations for the day. So I always write a bit about where I'm at, what's happening for me. I write about a quote that I have picked out, whatever that might be.
Right.
Every day is different, and then I write affirmations, and then I also write anywhere from up to 10 gratitudes for the day.
That is so amazing.
So every morning, it takes me anywhere from half an hour to an hour, depending on where I'm at. I will do some stretches and exercises. I have a task that I need to complete for myself inside the house, and a task outside. That brings me pride for myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And when you're doing all of those things that you're doing every day, I mean, that's actually a very long list of things that you do.
Yes.
But it is what you do for your health and well-being.
And
that is what keeps you here.
Yes.
So keep doing that.
Yeah.
The 10 things to be grateful for. I mean, we know that gratitude and being grateful and gratitude journals and everything has become a really big thing lately.
The more I do gratitude, the more I'm grateful for things.
Yeah.
Because they keep flowing into my life.
You said earlier you felt very disconnected. Disconnected from who you are and disconnected from your body,
have a clue.
right?
Yeah. Yes. Didn't have a clue who I was or what was going on. I mean, when you have in your mind that you're dying, because that's what the doctors are telling you, then you wrap your head around that, and that's the direction you go in, because our thoughts create.
Yep,
right?
they do. Yep.
So as soon as I realized that no, they're wrong.
I'm stopping this.
I'm stopping this craziness.
Yeah.
And it stopped. It took years.
Yeah. How many years was that it took you to sort of recover?
To recover. Probably, I'd say probably 3 of critical work. And by that, I mean coming off the medications, working through some of my traumas. I mean, I spent times, I think it was 3-4 times in the psychiatric ward because of the medications, so there was a lot that kind of happened around it. But now I'd have to say every day I continue to work towards getting better. It doesn't stop.
Like the work that you're doing to get better, because you want to get better and better.
Yes.
Right?
I just want to be at the top of my game, and every day that changes.
Yeah. I love that. I really love that about you, that you still, you always push for more, right? And it's not to a pushing where you're doing harm to your body. You're pushing to the point where you're like, I know my body can do more.
Yes.
and I'm going to put it to the test.
You got it.
Right? I love that.
Thank you.
And also, we were going to go over this one here, which is we don't become ill in isolation. Healing requires community, connection, and compassion, especially toward ourselves,
100.
which is,
Yes, that is correct. And that's true, and that's where that village is, right? We're very blessed that we had a lovely community that supported us on our journeys.
Yeah, we really are. And they really did. And then it gave us the tools to be able to continue through and help other people, right? So a lot of what we, wanted to bring into Harmony Caregiving when we were sort of putting this all on paper and getting it in motion,
Yes.
right, is things like the mindfulness walking, the earthing, the, let's get people outside, let's get breaths of fresh air. And a lot of that came from your journey.
Yes,
Right?
yeah, because I just found it very important for people to be treated with the utmost of respect. Especially, I find, not all people, but I find seniors, because they have contributed so much to our society and who we are, that I believe that they deserve 100% respect.
Yes, and so do I, and so do the people that we
Yes,
hire
I know
here,
you
right?
do.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very important.
And I think one of the key moments for me too was, we obviously won't say names or anything, but recognizing trauma in our clients, because they don't always talk about it, because like you've mentioned, it's very taboo. So some people die with all of this with them, right? I find that so sad. And I also find that there's a longer holding on, because they actually are probably, they don't necessarily love themselves for whatever path has brought them to where they are. And I really wish that we could help people to see their truths. But you can't always do that,
No, people have to come to that within themselves. And the majority of people that we serve have lived life without really talking about the traumas from their younger years.
Yes.
And it's very hard at 80 years old. I don't want to start dealing with that stuff. I just want to be happy with what I have in my life right now.
Yeah.
And then we come in and we support that.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think one piece of one word, it's words of wisdom, I guess, is that it's really important, I think, for family members who are able to tap into this kind of stuff to really look at their parents' journey and think, could there have been something really big that happened that caused them to be the way that they are? I know that lots has happened throughout a course of 80, 90 years through really hard times. And I remember we had one lady, this is where I was going earlier, we had one lady who was absolutely terrified to get into the shower. As I'm speaking this story, you'll probably remember this. And it wasn't until we started to really think about what it is that's terrifying her, that we recognized that there must have been something that was happening that happened before that's a constant trauma for her. So I think that if we can encourage family members to really look at where their parents have come from, look at where they've come from too, and start to visit some of these YouTube pages on trauma. And that's why we wanted to do this, because your story is so incredible. Your story has a happy ending in the sense that you're gonna you're able to help yourself. You're still here.
I'm still here.
Which makes my heart so happy. And you've been able to make so many other people happy because of it, right? So I just, I'm really glad that we got to do this. I know this is one of many times where we're going to sit down and chat.
Yes.
I hope.
We can.
Yeah.
We can.
And, just continue to do what you're doing. Before I close up, though, can I ask you one other thing?
You sure can.
Integrated health. So you had talked about, we always talk about like our medicine and the medical field that you've had to sort of work through. And then you also went to see somebody that was like in Eastern sort of philosophy medicine.
Oh, a few of them.
A few of them, like throughout your time, right?
I tried everything, like even some pretty strange things that were not good, but I tried them because I was looking for anything that would make me better. Like I was looking for external stuff instead of internal.
Yes.
So until I clued in that all of this external stuff is not really doing anything for me, I just kept going until finally. And then people have lots of advice, right? You should try this and you should try that. So you try this and try that, and nothing changes.
Yeah.
So like I say, once I I got in my mind that I needed to live my truth.
Yes.
Right? And accept what is going on in my life and release that doesn't serve me. It's another thing that we're taught. Release which does not serve you. So for myself, and this is very personal, it's I let go and I let God.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. One other thing I find really interesting when we were talking about how I think they've just sort of started to talk about this trauma piece, but you being a social worker from the 90s, did they talk a lot about trauma in the 90s, or it wasn't really talked about? It was still like taboo, and or people just didn't put voice to it, or like what?
Well,
where was that
we
in
did
your
do
training?
some discussion about it for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was in the diploma program.
Okay.
So once you get into your degree program and your master's, they do cover it a lot more.
Okay.
So mine was more an overview of things, and then it was my own studying and my own searching that I got to know some of the psychologists and therapists out there.
Right. Well, that's
and authors.
Yeah, I was just curious about that.
Okay.
So one of the things that I'd like to leave with is just, you talked about communities, you talked about being able to reach out if somebody needs help, and we also talked about the different resources. So Dr. Gabor Mate and Dr. Sarah Saul, I think those are some good people to start understanding trauma and how it impacts the body. Those are some people that you could start with. Do you have any other thoughts on anybody else that would be
There
good
are
to...
so many, actually. It's hard. I do a lot of the authors through our teaching. You know, the power of decisions, making decisions for yourself.
Yes.
And
Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. That's
You
like
Can
a,
Heal
like
Your
a...
Life with Louise Hay, of course. And she was actually a practitioner through the center. So
yes, that's right.
yeah, so lots of there. I mean, there's so much. Nowadays, all you need to do is put in Google or AI and what you're looking for, and they'll come up with a lot. So
yeah. Well, one thing I can say is that Dr. Mel Robbins says, fear is a habit. So is courage. Which one are you practicing today? And I can say, hands down, Darla, you've been practicing courage for many years.
Well, thank you so much, Sherry. It's been a pleasure.
Very welcome. And thank you for joining the show, and thank you for helping people in your time with Harmony and in your time now, you know, doing your thing and making sure that you're healthy. And in that sense, you're still a representation for people, or still an inspiration for people.
Thank you.
And I value that a lot in our friendship too.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.